Remember, our chant on impermanence is simply a recollection of all the moments of impermanence, of continual change, we could say, of, well, the Zen would say emptiness, but they wouldn't mean nothing. They would mean nothing arising independent of you. Now that's kind of amazing, because we often don't see ourselves as quite that powerful, do we? Nothing can arise without your viewing it to be known. And so there was an old Zen koan, and the koan was, and you'll have all heard it, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Have you ever heard this Zen koan? What is the sound of one hand clapping? And really, it spoke to two empty elements of emptiness: the emptiness of the object. What is the sound of one hand clapping? And what is the sound if it cannot be perceived? If there is no ear consciousness, if there is no consciousness to know it, then what can be known? What is then, in fact? And Rilke, a beautiful poet that German poet that I admire greatly, wrote beautifully and was quite retreatant. He took many years in silence. And he was a Christian mystic, right? So a very different tradition than Buddhists. And Rilke wrote, God, who would you be without me? Who would, if it could not be conceived, understood is really more the term, because concepts are really useless, right? If you could not know God, then what would be the point? And then throughout, well, infinite then religious and spiritual traditions, what do we say? Wherever you look, with openness, awareness, curiosity, right? There, God lives, right? And there's argument, right? Is he outside? Is he inside? Is he outside and inside? Is he in the tree? Is he in the dog? Is he in the... And I'm not that interested. That's not that interesting to me, because now we're just pointing at things, right? Or objects. And Rilke said it, didn't he? He said, well, it would depend on two things. It would depend on whatever was arising, and then it being known. And then he says, well, that's God. And really then, this idea of God, I wasn't planning this talk at all. This just kind of came up now. I'm sitting here with my shawl on. God then becomes something closer to non-separation, right? Then it comes closer to no thing and me viewing the thing, but and then Zen steps in again, the isness or the suchness, the knowingness, you could say, of it. And that this is truly then a moment of enlightenment, we could say, or salvation, I guess would be the Christians might say, or freedom. And do we get this idea? Because we make a lot of nonsense out of it, right? We put a lot of ineffable words, a lot of concepts, a lot of, even in Pema's book, she used some words like conscious, co-emergent, unconsciousness. She uses a word like that, or co-arising, like these two things arose but did not connect to each other. And we spend most of our time there, I think, don't we? Things happening really continuously, and us really in some kind of, the other words she's now using are words like propensity or habit or lost, hardwire. We could talk about the science, default mode network that has you miss life, really. And then what? Well, I'll go back to my first statement, then miss God, miss all connection, miss the interbeing interconnectedness of it all. And Greg says God is love. Well, love cannot occur first, though, can it? It does not stand alone. It requires an action. What's the action? Requires something. What? Awareness. If it did not what did Rilke say? You missed it. If you did not wake up to the arising reality of what? Non-separation in all things. And then there is, I agree with Greg, naturally arising love and compassion, because now there is no me separate from you. And we know this really deeply, don't we? You can feel it in there. You're going, yeah, that's right. And then we forget. Well, we're going to look today at how do we forget? We forget because of the hardwire. We forget because of the default mode network. The Zen tradition says things like kleshas. The kleshas, greed, hatred, and illusion get in the way, right? And once they got you, because that lizard brain is right there, closer to the mouth, I always say, than the rest, like really shortened, right? This needed to be like way down somewhere, not so close. But the capacity of awareness, ever arising, ever present, never gone, never dead. And this is the point of the Bardo. Never not available. And now the teachings that we're looking at in this book are even saying maybe not even maybe those propensities, maybe right, that awareness practicing will win out over the default, which is to go into, say, the teachings, the same deep sleep, the same dreamlike state we are mostly defaulting into, which is nothing to do with this life and its arising, but my story about it. Winning. We know this, don't we? The narrative wins and wins and wins. It makes me cry. Makes me cry. Why? Because then we miss this beautiful life, right? With everything in it, though, it doesn't mean you only get the good. It's not just right. It means there will be loss, pain, aging, illness, and death. But that even in this autumn day, as we began, didn't we? There is a beauty in it too. There is a beauty in it too. Do you know what I mean? You do. Some part of you does. Even if you're spending a little too much time thinking about it, I wouldn't do that. I would look for moments of remembering. And then I would take those extra 3 breaths in them to really make that cellular and not just a thought. Really breathe it in and feel its effects, feel its reality beyond any ideas or concepts. Because without direct experience itself, says some of the first lines that the Buddha spoke, really said, establish oneself and one's body. These are the first lines. And then sit still with ardency, with clear seeing, and know the truth of all things. Not that hard. I mean, the instructions aren't complicated. Establish one's body and sit still with ardency, with wholeheartedness. Establish the mind and see the truth of all things. It sounds lovely, doesn't it? Why don't we spend our 15 minutes in silence? We're going to do this on Tuesdays because sitting silently is as important, right? More language won't help us here. So establishing the body, whatever feels right for you. And letting go of all the words. Can you arrive this body like this. And then we notice, oh, this breath like this. And remember, for our practices in this tradition, we are resting simply in each out breath. And as Chogyam says, continuing out into vast open space, placing the mind in its boundless, unified, loving, non separate reality. Let's sit together like this. And then beginning to feel the unifying nature of mind, no separation between mind, heart, and that which is arising. Like the child coming home again and again. And then each object becomes the child at play, the brilliant firework of phenomenon coming and going, all within the warm and loving embrace of the mother, that still, silent, vast, and open space. And that unification, that knowing, awareness, interbeingness, that's it. And then we recognize it not as a thing at all, but an arising process. Ever flowing. And then the only thing that is variable is our attention, whether we recognize it or not. May this practice help us to see clearly, to remember who we really are, and to then be of benefit. Greg says we are only really alive when we are aware, for sure, for sure, the truth of this. And can we then, in that aliveness, recognize our patterns or recognize our distractions, someone might say, or recognize our storylines or recognize, right? And in so doing, be free of them. Because when you see them and you see their consequence, you couldn't continue. You go, well, who needs this suffering? Who needs this separation? Who needs this reactivity? Who we couldn't choose it, right? That's just the default that happens. And every time I notice one, I like, really? One more time. One more time. Had to play that out one more time. And then I see it clearly, and then I can feel compassion for the reality of the suffering of that, because that's all it is, right? One big pile of dukkha. And then you commit again. Okay, wait a minute, with seeing this is going to help me with compassion for myself and all those others. Can I recognize how I got caught one more time? One more time. And in so doing, be free. At least for now. And then it comes in a different flavor with a slightly different constellation, and get caught up again and then go, yep, this with that little extra. And that's the continual practice reality with the ever ripening reality. Each time we catch it, we are one more drop towards freedom. Every single time. Instead of going, why do I keep doing it? This is a mistaken understanding. It's, oh, great. I saw it again. Oh, wonderful. I'm clear now that I can recognize the way that one hooked me, the way that mind gripped back, the way I had to get into that discussion one more time about whether this was true or that was true. Or I just talked to my husband yesterday about fact fighting one more time. And I went, what I'm noticing is I don't care about the facts. I was just trying to tell a story or communicate something. And no, it wasn't 5, it was 7, throws me off. And then I feel confused by that. And I don't like that confusion. So then I don't like you because you look like the cause of that. And maybe for one of the first times, he said, yeah, I think I do that. I didn't feel blaming at all. I just was like, I'm realizing I get a little thrown off because I'm really not, it doesn't matter to me if it's 5 or 8. That really wasn't the point. And then I get distracted by that. And then there's a whole discussion about that. And he said, yeah, I think I do that. And we didn't continue. That was it. And I thought, oh my God, that's like a moment of enlightenment right there. But it began with non-separation. Really, it began with, I'm not seeing you as the problem. I'm noticing something about my mind when that happens. And I don't know how to work with it yet. I haven't figured that out because I do have, I'm prone to distraction, maybe like many of us. But at least it wasn't you keep doing it. And then it was, wow, I'm really noticing this and I'm not sure how to work with it. But what I was clear about is that this is my mind and something for me to be working with, not something he needed to do differently. That might be close to a first 50 years later. But how beautiful. Really, right? However long it took. Does it matter? I don't suppose. Just to go, it's just this quality of my mind. And I really want to practice with that because I'm guessing something like that's going to happen in that bardo there at the time of death. Something's going to come over here. Let's have an argument about facts, and off I'm going to go. Really instead of where my true heart mind wants to go, which is into that opportunity to be of service, however that can be established. So we're going to look at the chapters 8 and 9 today, but I want to tell you a quick story first, and then we'll look. And the story is from the Dalai Lama. And we've talked about it a couple times, but I want to go over his version of what goes through the bardos, right? Because that's our first chapter in chapter 8. What goes through the bardos? Is it me? Ooh, that's a tricky word, because no, certainly not your body. It's certainly not, right? We know that's staying behind. So what goes through and into the bardo? And the way that Pema's talked about it is what Chogyam taught her, which is your bad habits go into the bardo. Well, this is not encouraging at all. And so her message was, so you better clean up your bad habits because they're going to get you caught up. Well, this is a little bit consistent with the concept of purgatory, isn't it really? You're going to get caught up there. If you don't get it clear what's happening that's making this bias, this trajectory, we're going to get close to the Dalai Lama now, we're going to get trapped in the bardo. Well, this is, according to the Dalai Lama, a lot like billiards. He says if you perfectly hit a cue ball, perfectly, in the very perfect center, it would go on endlessly forever. It would just hit something, and that would be perfectly straight, and that would be perfect, right? And it would be endless and infinite. I love the idea because I know the truth of the physics. Nothing could stop it, could it? There would be no bias. There would be no offness. You get what I'm saying? Isn't this brilliant? And then he says, Chogyam says, except you don't hit it perfectly. Your habit hit it. And you were a little off to the right, or you're a little off to the left, and you're going to get all caught up there. And so rather than this infinite, open, continuous flow, you're going to get jammed off to a side. You're going to hit another thing. That thing goes off, and that thing right. And you could see how propensities grow, right? Because everything off that hits everything off that hits everything off equals, well, I'd say an argument, maybe a disagreement, a conflict, a friction, a prejudice, right? You can see it now, can't you? And so the Dalai Lama said the bardo only exists if you're off. If you're straight on, it's only open space. And then there's no stuck. You get it? And then it's just ongoing open arisings and passions, beautiful, endless, infinite, flowing, no friction, no conflict, no caught. I love, so doesn't that help in that concrete? So Chogyam wasn't wrong. He just spoke to that offside. He said, your propensities, your habit for putting a little hook on that ball is going to pull you off, and it's going to land you in a bardo. Not in the pocket, as they say in billiards, right? You're not in the pocket. You're not hitting, because if you hit that 12 balls perfectly, what would they do? They'd also go on endlessly forever because they're set up and designed to do so. It would just be the spread of all infinite, well, we could say love. Then you get this idea, everyone? Does that help at all? Yeah, it's confusing otherwise. Like, just my bad habits? Well, not exactly, but your perfect aim is also a practice, isn't it? It is also trained, right? The guy who hits, and I don't know if there's such a thing, but right, to hit the perfect ball is also training and practice. And so that will take you not into a bardo, that will take you off into perfect, continuous, open, infinite space where you then could decide where you want to go, it says. You then decide, like a good bodhisattva, do I want to return to be of benefit to other beings, or do I just want to keep going? Because that has ripened in this time to just become a part of that infinite, absolute, universal goodness. And that because of our propensities, because of the kleshas, our habits for greed, hatred, and delusion, we end up in all those side markets. Really not. And then confused about how we got there, isn't it? Like, how did this happen? How does it keep happening? And then, like a good blamer will, we blame the object. If only that, or you, or this weren't there, then I'd be perfectly straight, perfectly open. But is it true? You blame the cue like it was the ball's fault. Well, it wasn't the ball's fault at all. It was the player's fault, because that ball's made perfectly, weighted to do nothing but go. But you went, no, bad table, tilted, you hit it. If only you wouldn't have slammed into me, my arm wouldn't have done that thing, then I wouldn't have been off going there. And the answer is yes, you would have. That was about you. That was about you. And not with criticism, though, because that's not helpful. That's just one more off. Not with judgment, that's one more off. Not with hatred, off, delusion, off. I'm just a piece of shit. That's off. You're way off now. It's no improvement over blaming the other, is it? There's no benefit. And so how do we get straight? We get straight by resting in the Bardo-less, maybe I'll call it. I think that's probably a violation of something, but I'm going to go for it. What Christians call heaven, or right, that open, spacious, loving mother-child luminosity, you could say. Right. I feel squished this morning, says Dennis. That means you took an object, Dennis, and you decided it shouldn't be. And because we did it, we get squished by it. And rather than resist or reject, check back into your own heart mind and see, because the truth of our own unity and our own love is that it is unsquishable, isn't it? Really, it's unsquishable. That just means you have a little propensity for going into pity or shame or blame, like we all do. That's how we get squishable. And I know it too. And yet our recognizing it is the path. Can I see for a moment what it was in this mind? What quality of mind did I bring to the event, to the person, to the object that took us off? More off than we want to be. I think that's the true squishable moments. Really, it ends up not being about anybody else, doesn't it? It ends up being about our own self-loathing or self-hatred, or because we couldn't get it together. And that means, as a few of the chapters before have said, that we're too hungry, lonely, tired, or angry. And so just investigate with love. With love. Big work. Big work. That's why we're doing it together. I'm going to go to the Kindle here. So hang on a minute, folks. While I do that, we're going to look at chapters 8 and 9. Here we go. Here comes the Kindle. I don't see it on my whiteboard, so that's making me a little nervous. Let me try it again. It's right there and went somewhere. Here we go. I hope I didn't lose you there. It didn't have the book open, so that was my problem. Here we are. Let me see if we can find our way to chapter 8, and then I'll share the screen. I'm way ahead. I apologize. I think the name of chapter 8 is, can somebody remind me what goes through the bardos? So we've already talked about that. And so what's your definition? What's your word for what goes through the bardos? How would you talk about it? I said, we're saying propensities, bad habits, what storyline goes through, what else goes through the bardos? You get the idea, I think.
It'd be like the self, all that other judgmental things that you
Yeah.
inflict on yourself.
Yeah, every kind of mistaken delusion, right, of mind. The delusions they're like hooks on silk, right? You see them, we're catching ourselves pretty continuously. And that bardo is that stuck, not just the space, it's the getting stuck in it. And again, some have likened it to a concept of purgatory. And then the bardos in the Tibetan tradition define different types of purgatory. The hell realm, the hungry ghost, right? It goes, and be careful, because if you're greedy, you're gonna come back in the hungry ghost realm. If you're angry, right, you're gonna come back in probably the human realm, having to suffer the realities of this human life. If you're greedy, well, you might come back in the God realm or jealous God realm, right? But it says each of these kleshas has a kind of directional, right? A kind of place we're heading. And she'll link those up. And remember, it's just a cosmology. I don't tend to, it's not that interesting beyond the quality of my mind and its impact to me. And do I notice that in my greedy moments, no matter what I consume, no matter how beautiful, no matter how pleasant, it comes and goes too. And then I'm still left with a certain kind of hunger, a certain kind of emptiness. And that's also known in the God realm, which is no matter all the good stuff you get, it's not quite enough. Isn't it true? Doesn't matter. However good it is, it too will not. It is an offness, because now you're attached to that in a way that's going to pull you not straight through into vast, open, luminous mother-child connection, but off into one of those darker pockets, we could think of it, or stuck places. So what goes through the bardos? She writes here at the beginning, it looks like page 45 or so. If I'm continuously being born and dying, then who is it that goes through these experiences? If there is no one me, if there is no continuous oneness called the me-ness of me, the self, then what goes through? Since it says there is just continuous arising and passing. And we could think of that as the turning of the ball, right? Each rotation is its own, right? Like no other. But the straightness of the one will lead to the straightness of the next. And the straightness of the next will lead to the, right, non-linear, I don't mean it as, but continuous, right? And every little delusion, every little blame, every little rage episode, right? Every one of those is going to take us off in some way and contribute solidly to our suffering. What is it that continues from lifetime to lifetime? Remember, I don't know that. I don't have any experience. I can't say whether this continues. I do know, though, what happens in this life, and we're assuming that the physic is similar, that if you're on enlightened here, the next moment is likely to be also a moment of clear seeing. If we're off here, the next moment is likely to be off something. And does life itself or breathing itself determine it? No, I think it's physics. I don't think it has anything to do with the body, except that the body carries a certain kind of habit, memory, and energy too, doesn't it? But really, is it that moves us? No, I don't think so. I think it is a certain quality of mind. And since we're now beginning to understand that consciousness, the consciousness that is independent of things, that mother-child luminosity, that complete unity, it is always only perfect. Even when the child messed up. I love this, right? So a child that made the mistake, or each of us that makes a mistake, that would be loved, that would be held, that would be cherished, right? Would do what? Nothing but get straighter, wouldn't it? There'd be no off and off and off and off. This is our habit nature, which is you messed up, I slapped you, I gave you the off, off, off. But really, okay, meh, I took the cookie, right? Yeah, right. You take the cookie because that's Rich says that's just life. That's just learning. That's just being human. And the mother says, no, I understand. The cookie is delicious and it feels like fun to have the cookie now. And I understand that. And it is also important to balance that with nutrients, things that can help you grow and learn, and, right? And so maybe we could put the cookie over here for a minute, have a few of these things, and then maybe enjoy the cookie too. And what would happen? Well, the kid might just keep screaming for the cookie, except no, not exactly. The propensity did not continue. No, it did not. No, there's something larger holding it. It cannot go on and on and on. It goes on and on and on when the mom says, you shit, slaps the kid, grabs the cookie. I saw a mom get out of the car yesterday at the beach and go, shut up. And I went, now I understand that. So let me not say for 1 second that I don't get where she was coming from. That is not my point. That is not my point. But my point was the propensity continued off, and it even got me. It got right out of the car with those two little boys. She screamed it, and it vibrated literally right through that parking lot. Now, do I blame her? I do not. Why? Mother luminosity. I understood. I've screamed, shut up. I know exactly what she's talking about. Dead ended it. No more continuation. Didn't have to turn into a negative, into a negative, into a negative, into a negative. And I said the loving kindness prayer for her and me and all of us who screamed, shut up. Right? No more. No more Bardo. No more continuation. No more propensity. Boom. We ended it. How fabulous is that? And how difficult is that? Right? Because remember, what leads, leads. What goes, goes. What continues, continues. And you're changing the entire course of what, well, I'm going to say everything. You just stopped it for everybody. Instead of, yeah, cranky mom on a Monday. Right? So watch, this is our work, isn't it? All of us. And it's monumental then, isn't it? It's not one little moment. No, you stopped all those ricocheting billiard balls going in all those crazy directions with one moment. The standard answer to all these questions is Namshe. Namshe is a Tibetan word. It means consciousness, but not the mother-child luminosity. That's not the kind, because that's unconditioned. That's not a coming and going anything. This consciousness is what they call, and I don't like the languaging, but we'll use it, dualistic, object and recognizing object. That's called dualistic consciousness. There's separation there, isn't it? Me and the thing. me and the thing. That's what's going to go into the bar. Remember, bardo is what? We think about it like a side pocket. Remember, otherwise what? Continually flowing. And so namshe, the dualistic thinking, the slight offness or severe is what goes into the bardo. And I want us to use the billiard table off there. Rosa sees a mountain. If Rosa sees a mountain, there is the mountain, and Rosa is a true. And in these teachings, it says there is the appearance of mountain, this object, right, constellation of things, and Rosa using her eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and the mind that knows it. And then you know that moment in nature, don't you? Where there's no mountain, there's just that sense of unification. Whether you're standing in a grove of trees or you're looking out at the ocean or you're in the water, there's no more me and it. There's another feeling. You know that feeling? Happens in nature for us. That's the mother-child woman. I am not separate from this at all, right? There is a wholeness. Oneness is a dangerous word, but I'll use it, but I only mean momentary, because there is no one, right? Because it's not stuck or fixed or solid, right? It is one in its continuation of wholeness. In its we use oneness as a big O, meaning, and then we do that to God, right? The guy or the woman or the being. No, well, that's dangerous, because then how do we respond in the present moment with an unknown set of arising if you're a thing? Well, you couldn't. You have to join a process, right? And so a processes, get what I'm saying, is maybe a better understanding than a guy, a place, or nouns. And she says it's better to understand this as a verb, doesn't she herself? So that's what I want you to understand about that. I didn't love this, the way this was written. I thought dualistic consciousness was a word nobody was going to understand or get, or really, what does it mean? There's a sense of division between the me and the everything else, and that I thought was useful. By appearance, things seem to remain the same, but the reality is that nothing is the same. And she goes on to talk about herself, her birth, her being assigned a DNA, her parents being who they are. And then she goes on to say, and what is also true is there's not one thing about this body that's the same. There's not one thing about this Pema that is the same. There's, right. And she goes on to ask some of her friends, Ken MacLeod, a very lovely teacher, and Chogyam, she uses those two examples. And Ken says, in an absolute reality, nothing goes through the bardo. Well, that's closer, isn't it? Because without the propensities, there's just energy flowing, right? You wouldn't even call that then a ball. You just say energy moving, flowing. The ball gets formed the minute we go sideways. Now we form something solid, don't we? Now we formed an object and a not object. Now we're off going into the side pocket. And so he said, and I know he was joking a little bit, nothing goes into the bardo, because remember, the bardo's a side pocket. There is no off ball. There's just energy, because there's nothing solid. Energy flowing, arising and passing. And again, use your own examples. You've been in these moments where there was no thing. You were just in experiencing. Nothing separate at all. And that would be the closest. This consciousness isn't some stable entity that flows through everything. Oh, she says it here. It's constantly dissolving and reforming. Why? Because it is only responsive. It continually just opens to what's here, and then opens to what's here in this, and then opens to what's here. And if it were solid, what would it be? It'd be fixed. and then it can't respond. And this is how we get in trouble every day, don't we? We go, wait a minute, I didn't plan that. I didn't see that. And I didn't want that. And there it is. And now the fixed me that goes, it's just supposed to be like this, is kind of insane, really. We react, and then right off we go, and then off we go. And then we come home after work and tell a bunch of stories about how off it was this shitty day of mine. Well, you did not have a shitty day. You had a day. That was true. And you spent it in propensities, going rant, rant, and rant to the whole of the day, right? Could we see each one of those moments as some habit of mind? Now, advancing it to who? That same woman that said, shut up to her kids. Look at that. Went right through an entire parking lot. Right. And then we each have the opportunity, because now we're the next ball. Right. Do I want to just into that, or am I going to find a way to openness, to wholeheartedness, to compassion, which means I have to take it on too. I can't just let it be her saying, shut up. I have to remember that it's me. Don't I? Yeah. I have to go, oh yeah, all those moments. And then I could feel for us all. Now we're in a process. Once again, we're not in me and you, this and that. You get the difference. So those separations are always what contribute to our suffering. Here it says, not so from the point of view of Ken, what goes through the Bardo? Nothing. He means energy, not a thing. What we think of as consciousness is fluid, more like a verb than a noun. So then we understand that better. It's not a fixed or frozen thing. We can have this view of ourselves as frozen, fixed. Well, that's the self-clinging, we call it, self-making mind that is looking for what? Security, stability, the known, what it wants, what it doesn't want. We demand of life that it be what we want or need in order to be okay, as if life were our problem. And of course it is not. The Buddhist term is co-emergent ignorance, co-emergent unawareness. We could simply call it delusion, that somehow life is acting against me in some because why? Life is not fixed. Life is not solid. Life is not a thing. It is an energy, a flow that you are now separate from, is all. Squishable, Dennis said. And then it becomes a squishable moment, separate from the truth of suffering. Separate from the truth of your suffering. Separate. And then non-responsive, frozen, stuck, fixed, in, I don't want it, I don't like it. Why is it going this way? Do we get this? And look at the power and agency we have then, if we don't just buy in to them. We are unaware that we are not a solid, permanent entity, and that we are not separate from that which we perceive. Could it be that we could in any way be separate from what we are perceiving? How could it be? It is only through that lens that you are seeing. Well, clean the lens, clear the lens is the suggestion. Don't try to change life, because then you can respond with understanding, compassion, kindness. If properly understood, the open space and the manifestation, that which is arising in it, are not separate at all. They're like the sun and its rays. This means that everything we're experiencing right now is a display of our own mind. Co-emergent wisdom. The minute you've got that figured out. Co-emergent awareness. Everything arising is a display of my own mind. off in wanting or not wanting a lot of the time. In reality, no one and no thing in our world is fixed and static, not even us. You, like everyone else, have been under the sway of co-emergent delusion for a very, very long time. It will take a little while, she says, to dismantle those habits, but like water dripping on rock, each one meaningful, each moment, right? Another chance to see clearly and to arrive again at basic groundlessness. You don't make the propensity solid either. It's not true. Because that moment that someone says, shut up, and I go, yeah, I know that, and don't shut up back, we've broken the habit. We've broken the spell. And we are once more simply in vast open space, because that's the only possibility of the loving and compassionate heart. It has no other nature. It couldn't do anything else, could it? There's no sides. There's no limit. There's no end. There's no thing. So it's just, back into open space. And she looked at me and I smiled. And she smiled back. Why? I was going, I know. Yeah. They make you crazy, don't they? Yeah. And we have since then we have healed each other. Haven't we? Just that one moment. Instead of going, like the surfers were all looking, they're like, man, because they remember that mom. That was probably their mom going, really? Surfing, not school? This is not good. Just like her two little boys, I think we're doing. We can see for ourselves how fluid our consciousness actually is. We can observe how our thoughts and emotions and perceptions appear and disappear in relationship to the object, and how this process just goes on and on without a break. It's continuous. How it goes on and on based on what? Perception. So we can take the spilt milk and knock you out of the chair, or we can take the spilt milk and say, I know, right? We get to dinner and we're all excited and there's a lot of energy, and we can laugh and get a paper towel. And that has everything to do with how it's going to unfold, right? And it's the Dalai Lama says infinite directions. So that idea of just one flow is not quite accurate. It's not quite, is it? It's not one. It's every one in everything in its flowing nature. But it would flow without chaos if we could arrive. We see that this happens even though we can't pinpoint any subject who experiences these arisings, because we don't see ourselves as a self. We see it as clear seeing. This is just me seeing things. No one lives and no one dies then. Life and death, beginnings and endings, gains and losses are all like dreams of magical illusion. Because it's just the next turning of the wheel of the Dharma. That's how it's understood. That's what the wheel of the Dharma is. Just the next turning into this moment, arising in this moment. The two truths, we're not going to have time for that. I thought we would. I wanted to spend some time on this. This is a very, it can easily become conceptual and not really understood. So I want you to look this week, your practices, to see if you can't find these unifying, open, loving, embracing moments. Look for them. Look for where they are. We don't have to look for the other ones, do we? We don't have to look too hard for those. But see if you can't find the, I'm just here in arising, my perceptions, in recognition, am not bringing my bias, my prejudice, my preference, my habits to and that requires a certain kind of stillness, and see what happens. What if you just completely arrive without it? Well, according to these teachings, it says there would only be one thing to do, which would be to love it and respond. That you could do nothing else, that it wouldn't even be a possibility. There'd be no offness, there could be no sideways, there could be no side pocket ricocheting, anything. That there could only be in this complete openness, love, and then its response. I want you to see if it's true. And so then you might reel that back by going, if I am resting in a moment of loving, what have I let go of? Well, everything is the answer, isn't it? Everything. Your preference, the way you thought it ought to go, how that thing should have come out, what they should have said. There's just, it's not even in there. It's just opening perfectly into the wholeness of this moment. And yes, you do know it because you have those moments of complete, open, and boundless love. Begin with yourself because you're spending a lot of time there, aren't you? With you off and off and off and off. You're now in the ditch and you're grooving that ditch. By the way, says the neuroscience, you're making that deep and almost unavoidable. And so you got to climb out of there and climb out of there and climb out of there to what? Just this moment, just like this. Perfect. And then you become perfect in joining and in response. And then this is what Rilke said. There is no God without me. God needs me. And then I too am godly because I'm just that vast open space. How about that? Seems like something we're spending some time from my point of view. Let's sit together for just our 2 minutes because I think more words are not going to serve us well here. I don't think we need that. And so finding our way back into that completely ignited open heart. And we let that open heart now expand to vibrate the whole body. And you don't have to try to settle anything down. Let that go. You're just relating to that vibration of aliveness, of love, of possibility, of our true undying capacity. And we breathe it. And we feel its resonance, its radiance. It's always already here-ness, never dying. And we commit ourselves, don't we? We say, yep, just like this in the next moment too. No matter its condition. May we be filled with loving kindness, with compassion, with clear seeing, with wisdom and equanimity. And may we all be well. May we breathe and may we be peace, calm, ease. May we be open, receptive, like that loving mother, embracing it all. Everything in me, everything in me. May we then be unconditionally happy. And may this practice this very morning contribute. May we look for the moments of loving luminosity. May we commit ourselves to breathing in and remember. So beautiful. Moments of non-separation, let's look for them. Let's abide in them. Let's breathe in. Thank you all so much. We are collecting money for those of you who are left. I know there's not many. I'll have to make another announcement. I'll put it in the newsletter too. We spent over $600 this time at the Dollar Tree because they went in the back with us and grabbed all these amazing boxes. And so I took them all because it is going to be Thanksgiving and then the holidays. And so we are way short of our collected $280. And so we're just going to be collecting that over the next until the new year. So all monies that are contributed now will be going to that St. Andrew's Pantry Fund. And thank you all so much for that. We will be meeting in the garden on Saturday. We're going to be talking about part 2 of the wisdom of no escape. Part 2, the wisdom of no escape, and how resting exactly where we are without bias is the path, even when it's something we don't like or think will be painful. And it may be, but it is still the right way. So thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you Thursday with Greg at 7. Hope to be there. I will. And then Saturday at 7:15 for coffee and 7:30 to start. I look forward to seeing you guys. Be well, everyone.